I think of a particular Thanksgiving growing up when I was like in middle school, and I just like totally overate, and I remember just like laying on the ground and just like unbuttoning my pants. That is a 10.
Yeah, also known as my happy place.
We are made up of body, soul, and spirit. Like we are a complex human being, right? So you can't just focus on one piece. We really need to look at the health state of your body, of your soul, and of your spirit.
So if we're trying to get away from this diet talk and the culture of dieting, getting away from the scale, what's a better angle to take?
I mean, I would say number one.
Time for love again. My time for love is here.
Welcome back to Quality Time with Gabe and Grace.
I'm Gabe.
And I'm Grace, and this is episode 14.
That's right. We are just steadily climbing up the puberty ladder in terms of the age of our show right now.
We're in adolescence,
Yeah,
for sure.
this is the wonder years.
Where's Winnie? So this week we have an exciting topic. We're going to jump back into this concept of the different buckets that we're stewarding through life. We talked about finance last week, and this week we're going to jump into health. So that's a fun one.
Yes.
But before we get there, let's start out with a little quality over quantity.
Let's do it. Now, what might that section entail in terms of what to expect?
This is a segment that we like to cover in every episode that is us just highlighting our weeks, right? So we talk about one quality experience, item that we've encountered, some food, some happening, something in our lives that's making it better. We talk about one thing instead of many, and that's what makes quality over quantity. So what's sticking out to you this week?
So we talked a little bit before the show about our shared experience.
That's right. We're going to talk together.
So we're going to kind of combo it.
Yeah.
I'll lead out if that's all right.
Sure.
So the quality over quantity experience this week, as it is many weeks, is a food experience that we've had. And
Yes,
we have it almost once a week, basically, at this point. It's kind of like
maybe.
a weird sort of go-to where...
Once every 2 weeks, maybe.
1 week. Okay. Anyways, so it's this local place that we found. I don't. Were you the one that found it?
I found it through a local food blogger.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Shout out to This Babe Eats.
Ah, yes. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that account. Sweet.
Really good.
Yeah. So this place is called the Mustard Seed Deli.
Yes.
It's a little deli, maybe 10, 15 minutes from us.
Well, and the thing about delis, before you go on, is being from the Northeast, originally from Rhode Island, that is like a staple, right?
Yeah.
To have a good deli. You don't find delis like that in Florida.
Yeah,
and
you
so
really
when
don't.
you stumble upon one, usually brought by someone from New York or somewhere else up in the Northeast, that is when you cherish that deli because
Yes.
you're not going to get many of those. Again, quality over quantity.
That's right.
You're going to get one good deli.
Yes.
So that's our deli.
Yes, it's our deli. So we came across this place, and you know the food there, the sandwiches, the soups, this, that, and the other, like it's all just teeming with, you know, extra care and love. You know, when you look at the ingredients, like I think a good marker of a good deli is just when the sandwiches are like, you know, yay tall and just like
stacked up,
packed. Yeah.
They have great recipes. Like they have unique recipes for all their sandwiches, and they name them, I think, after like family members.
Yeah,
so it's
something
like
like
the Ann or
the Kevin.
Exactly.
Yeah, the
And
Rocco.
So,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's fun.
So we, like I said, we found out about this place many moons ago, and we've just been going and loving it. And so then one day, and we'll get into some, you know, menu items because I have a couple of faves. But
yeah, for sure.
One day we were in there, and I think what happened is we saw one of the sandwiches was named the Rocco.
Yep.
And that name is a very unique name. Like you don't really know a whole lot of Roccos in your life.
Not around here.
Unless you've encountered one before. And so it kind of got me thinking, and I was like, Rocco, where have I heard that name before? And so then we pulled up the website, and we were looking at the chefs. And it turns out that the chef and the owner of this place is none other than Chef Rocco, who was the chef at our wedding reception.
Yes, it's so crazy.
Was on the catering team.
Yep.
And balled out, basically, and just, you know, delivered one of the most incredible meals we've ever had. And we're not just saying that because it was our wedding. Like, multiple people have told us the same thing.
Well, it was cool, too, because at the wedding, I feel like you don't see this much, but we had told, like, our wedding planner and different people involved, like the food and like the experience of dining around the table together is going to be like very cherished to us.
Yeah.
And so I think they just went above and beyond. And so Chef Rocco actually came out like before the meal was served and said like, hi everyone, I'm Chef Rocco.
Yeah.
Tonight I've prepared for you, la-di-da-di-da.
Yeah.
And like presented it. So
Yeah, and it was
it's
family
memorable to
style
us.
too. So like everyone was kind of serving themselves. It kind of broke the typical customs of formality at a wedding reception, where it was
Yes.
really just like everyone's family. Oh, pass this or pass that. Bring that over here.
Right.
So, you know, obviously that was almost 9 years ago now. So the name just didn't ring a bell, and we didn't have a deep relationship with him other than
No.
just as a vendor for our wedding.
Yeah.
So anyways, we're like, oh my gosh, it's Chef Rocco. No wonder we love all of his creations here at the deli.
Yes, just a special
So that just
touch.
made it that much more special, right? So anyways, we frequent this place a lot, and they have some sandwiches. Like if you eat meat, they have these chicken sandwiches, one of which I think is like a temporary. This is my now getting
Yes,
to my
you got
quality
the special.
over quantity for this week. Yeah. The special, it's called a Julius sandwich. I've pulled up the ingredients here to
It's
tell
one of
you
those
what
things
goes
you
in.
can try to copycat at home, maybe.
So good. Yeah. So I might put a photo up, might not. We'll see. But it's crispy fried chicken sandwich with provolone cheese, melted, of course. Caesar salad kind of just put up in there. So that
Yes.
flavor profile just makes it. And then an herb aioli on, I forget what kind of bread, like maybe a ciabatta, some kind of like delicious bread. But dude, it's like I said, stacked to the ceiling, so fresh, so delicious. And then they had a chicken minestrone soup that was
yeah.
like, oh, so good. And honestly, they have a tomato soup, which I'm not actually even a huge tomato soup guy.
Same.
But I get their tomato soup
really
every
good.
single time. So we actually, I got one of each soup just to like, you know, have
Little
all of the
sampler.
things. And and then they have like some cookies that are wrapped, like some fresh baked goods, like at
Yeah.
the checkout.
We've
It's
never
just-
tried them, but so
Yeah.
this time that we went this week was probably our final trip
Yeah.
to Mustard Seed Deli before we moved. So
Yeah.
we made it into a special experience and got a dessert and did all the things.
Yeah,
and we
yeah,
sat
yeah.
outside. It was really great.
Yes.
But I like to get the Cranston.
The Cranston. Can't go
The
wrong.
Cranston. The Cranston is just an amazing like tuna salad sandwich.
Yes.
It's so good. Like they have just ratioed everything
Yeah,
perfectly.
super fresh.
And something about Gabe and I is that we love a good red onion if it's used correctly. So there's red onion in it. It's excellent. And
Yes.
it's just, mwah. So if you live in Tampa and you haven't
Yeah.
checked out Mustard Seed Deli,
It's-
this is just a free advertisement. Go check them out.
Yeah, not sponsored, but maybe
Yeah.
should be, you
Yeah.
know.
All right. And if you don't live around here, I'm so sorry.
Sucks for you, you know. But yeah.
So with all of that, let's jump into this week's topic.
All right, so we're going to switch things up this week for this topic. I'm actually going to kind of play MC and ask our resident health expert a couple of questions. And so as we're getting into this topic, we recognize that when you look at the 8 keys that we outlined a couple episodes ago, you realize that if health isn't in its rightful place, it really prohibits you from getting the rest of the list accomplished. And, you know, Grace being a registered dietitian and a certified personal trainer and just a general wealth of knowledge in this area, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions that I think would benefit our listeners and our viewers, and really just talk about this whole concept of having a relationship to nutrition and to your body and to food versus maybe some of the more classical approaches, you know, looking at it through the lens of like diet and, you know, being on a strict workout plan. I mean, those are parts of it and sort of outgrowths of, you know, caring about like how we steward our temple. But all of this comes back to the concept of stewardship. And that's where we feel like we're almost in this little series that has kind of grown out of that episode about you know, our framework for planning, where we've even got some comments of like, you know, hey, can you break this down or break that down? And so we've just thought, yeah, let's keep going and kind of unpack that. So are you all right if I ask you a couple of questions?
Of course.
All right,
Go.
let's go. So number one, I just kind of mentioned it there. What is the difference between viewing our health as, you know, us having a relationship with our body versus just sort of the classical approaches, whether it is, you know, pertaining to diet or fitness or that sort of thing? Like unpack that concept of relationship within your temple, your body.
Yeah, I love that. So what I like to think of is, and I talk about this with my clients often, is, you know, we are made up of body, soul, and spirit. Like we are a complex human being, right? So you can't just focus on one piece. We really need to look at the health state of your body, of your soul, and of your spirit. And I also say, like, when you think about that, you know, these are three parts of you that are kind of coexisting together. And when you think of that, you really want to say, like, if the three of us are roommates, are we treating each other rightly? Are we respectful? Are we careful with one another, right?
Yeah. Who's paying the most because they have the master bedroom? I get it. Totally. Yeah.
Right. So the idea here is every relationship, it calls for two major keys: communication and trust. And so just like you and I have to communicate in order to live in harmony with one another, so do we need to communicate with our body. And what do I mean by that? Well, our body is always sending messages. It's always communicating something to us.
Sure.
Are we responsive? And so part of communication is, yes, saying something and then also responding to it. And so if the body is telling you something, are you responding or are you ignoring? And kind of pressing ignore until a problem arises. So I like to think about the communication piece and then the trust factor. So if your body is communicating with you on the regular and you're very responsive to what it's communicating, the needs that it's laying out for you to meet, if you're very responsive, then there's a trust factor that's built. And we start to have a really healthy relationship. So that's kind of the way I like to think about it. If you have an unhealthy relationship, there's a lack of communication and a lack of trust, and there's a disconnect. So a lot of women that I work with will say things like, I feel really disconnected from my body. And I think that that would resonate for a man as well. I think you could feel very much like, I'm not very in tune, I'm not really responsive, and I'm not really doing anything intentional to take care of my body in this season. So that would be an unhealthy season or an unhealthy relationship. So we're really talking about, like, how do we optimize this relationship? We start going back to the basics, and that's about slowing down, tuning in, recognizing that our bodies are pretty incredibly designed. They are really amazing at telling us what they need. But if we don't know how to listen and respond, then that's where the disconnect happens.
Yeah. And that's such a paradigm shift from at least the way that I grew up understanding the body. And like I said, you know, health in general, nutrition, fitness, all of that wrapped in one. If you are, let's say, older than 25 or 30 or something like that, like, you likely grew up in the same era that we did of diet culture.
Definitely.
And, you know, just seeing, honestly, like the Arnold Schwarzeneggers on stage and on the screen, and seeing, you know, action stars and just like these pictures of health and you know, fitness and nutrition in a very sort of aesthetic focused way. And so when, you know, we got married and I saw you, you know, starting your business and crafting the platform that you were going to teach from and educate from, it was so countercultural to hear you talking about all this through the lens of relationship. And so that leads me to my next question. You know, there's this concept of having a relationship to your body, which I think is really powerful and interesting because, like you said, it means that there's a push and a pull and listening and, you know, being intuitive as opposed to just like crushing your body into submission and telling it what to do against its will. But then what about, I've also heard you talk about having a relationship to food. And again, when we talk about the way that most of us understand food and nutrition, I think it probably comes from the lens of diet culture, meaning, you know, restriction, meaning, you know, I have to count my macros or my calories, or, you know, if I want to make my body smaller, I need to eat less and move more, as opposed to maybe a little bit more nuanced approach of recognizing, well, what does my body, this body that God gave me, actually need to thrive? Some of us are born into bigger bodies, smaller bodies, you know, all kinds of shapes and sizes. And health, as we've been learning, is not really sort of this one size fits all thing. It's very contextual. So talk about what it means to have a relationship to food now, and how that can also impact what we put down the hatch and how we value nourishing the body that we have a relationship with as well.
That's so good. I think stemming off of that concept of feeling disconnected from your body, right? Being checked out, not really being in a intimate relationship. What happens with that is I hear a lot of people come to someone like myself, a registered dietitian, and say something like, just tell me what to eat. Just give me a meal plan.
Yeah, I've been guilty
tell
of
me
that.
exactly what to do and I'll just follow it.
Yeah.
People love that because that's what a diet is. It's just,
Yeah.
here's the rules, go ahead and follow them. It's a list of external rules that you just go, okay, I'm just going to stick with this.
Yeah.
But it never works. When we look at the research around dieting, diets just lead to more diets.
Sure.
And beyond 2 to 3 years, the majority do not keep off the weight that's lost on a diet.
Yeah.
So the diet is really just a cycle. And that's why we're talking about moving away from diets and actually working on relationship with food, because we're talking about long-term health, not just little short-term wins, quote unquote wins that end up kind of rebounding after time. So with the disconnect, we say, just give me a list. That's what I'll follow. But what I would say when it comes to working on your relationship with food, I would say there needs to be an element of knowledge and understanding. And this is why I really do value coming to see an expert, coming to see someone who can actually teach you what your body needs. And we do that not just by like, well, you look like you might work with this. We look at things like blood work.
Yeah,
we look at
good.
things like your health history. We look at things like your genetics. And we come to a conclusion of this is what's going to help you to thrive.
Sure.
This is what's going to help to see these blood markers totally change and reverse in the right direction.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at an individualized approach. And so that's where just any old meal plan, any old thing you can just, Google and find online may not be right for you. We're talking about a relationship with food where it's knowledge-based, it's science-backed. So we know this is fit for me. But then also that's great. You understand and okay, now this is the way that I need to eat. But still then it's just another set of rules, right?
Yeah.
So here's where we approach it from not only a knowledge or a head space, but also we consider emotional and social factors.
Yeah, totally.
We consider how you relate to food. So do you emotionally eat a lot? Is food a real crutch for you on hard days? Is food something that's extremely nostalgic for you? So there's a comfort factor there. There's things that we need to address and we need to peel through to have more understanding with how we relate to food. Because I relate to food differently than you do.
Totally.
But if we can start to dive into our relationship with food, why it is the way it is, how it got that way, and just understanding and being eyes wide open about it, we can begin to have more grace for ourselves, but then we can begin to know how to navigate the relationship to the ultimate place is finding peace with food. So that food is not a source of stress in your life. It's a source of enjoyment. It's also a source of care, self-care. And you have it in its rightful place.
Yeah,
it doesn't
that's good.
feel like an idol in your life.
Yeah. I was just going to say that especially when you are, approaching the world through the Christian worldview, and you understand that there are, anything that we put before God is an idol, as Scripture, refers to it. I think one of the most missed and sort of like under the radar idols in our world is food. It's like, we're feeding King's stomach. And so, that's something for me personally that, we joke a lot about my love of like fancy food experiences and being in the kitchen and this and that, but there is a line to toe of like, how much of this am I making food this ultimate God in my life where, I can't just eat a nourishing meal that actually, fuels my body, but instead I need to have the most decadent, triple stacked cheeseburger with, truffle Parmesan fries and all the things that like, it's delicious, but like, do I need to do that for every meal?
Yep.
And do I need to do that when my body is screaming at me, don't do it, don't do it.
Yes.
We're struggling, our blood pressure's high, this, that, and the other, and so you've taught me that to recognize hunger cues, which, I don't know if you want to speak to the hunger scale.
Sure.
That's a really powerful, really helpful everyday sort of metric that you can use even just to recognize, do I really need this or am I still hungry or whatever? And so maybe talk about that.
Yeah, I do want to hit that. And I want to just back up for 1 second. You mentioned, desiring that decadent meal for almost every meal kind of thing. And it's like, if you are a person like that, you might call yourself a foodie. And it's like, why is that? I think something we can unpack there is often like, how many directions are you getting dopamine from?
Yeah.
And so this kind of comes back to a form of emotional eating. It's like you are getting such a hit of dopamine from those really decadent meals, which is okay, but again, if we eat every meal extremely decadent, then we're probably looking at our blood markers and going, is there something that needs to change here?
Guilty.
And so with that, I think it's just a self-evaluation, right? And it's saying this is part of addressing your relationship with food. It's saying, oh, okay, I maybe don't have enough coping mechanisms, and I maybe don't have enough areas of pleasure in my life. So I need to start thinking about, are there other ways that I can find pleasure outside of food? Because don't get me wrong, food should be an area of pleasure in our lives. It's an amazing area of pleasure. Like the taste, like the fact that God created us to have these taste buds and experience all these tastes and textures, and amazing. I'm not saying don't enjoy food. Like I would call myself a foodie. I love it. But if that is the number one and the go-to all the time to get pleasure, then we need to start thinking like, do I need more time outside? Do I need a hobby? Do I need to see friends more often? Do I need to have more intimacy with my partner? Do I need to, the list goes on, right? Of ways that we enjoy life, we experience pleasure. So it can be with food, but it shouldn't always be food is the go-to source, right? But to answer your question regarding hunger, I think that's another tool. So when it comes to working on your relationship with food, it's all about tools in the toolbox and what you can pull from. So yes, we can address emotional factors. We can address coping strategies, but also we can talk about getting to know your body's innate ability to express hunger and express fullness. And so when we think about the body systems, we've got like the hormonal system, the endocrine system, we've got the nervous system. All of these things are signaling, firing off, and communicating with one another to let you know, hey, it's time to eat, and hey, it's time to stop eating. And it's incredible that we have those factors factored into our bodies. What a cool thing. Again, when you think about intelligent design, it's hard to deny we have a creator when you think about the way our bodies are set up.
So good.
So getting back in touch with hunger and fullness is something that takes time. It takes patience. It takes practice, because when you are on a diet, what you're doing is exactly the opposite. You're saying, I'm going to ignore hunger. And I'm going to now go off of an external set of rules that might be the time frame I'm supposed to eat or the amount I'm supposed to eat. These are external, instead of turning internal to the body's ability to tell you, hey, it's time to start. Hey, it's time to stop. So we're getting back there, and that takes time. It takes practice, but we use a scale within the intuitive eating approach to food. And that scale is basically, some say 0, some say 1 to 10. And so we could say 10 is Thanksgiving full. Like I ate way too much. I had a second plate at Thanksgiving. I need to unbutton my pants. I almost feel sick. I'm so full. I think of a particular Thanksgiving growing up when I was like in middle school, and I just like totally overate. And I remember just like laying on the ground and just like unbuttoning my pants. That is a 10.
Yeah. Also known as my happy place.
That's a 10. So a 0 or a 1, right? That's going to be like, you can't even climb a flight of stairs. You are so ravenous. You are so hungry. You're maybe even beyond that hangry point to where like you're so hungry, you're almost numb to it at this point, right? So there's a really severe hunger happening there. So those are extremes, right? On each side of the spectrum. In the middle, we find a neutral space. I'm not hungry. I'm not full. I'm not even thinking about food. When you find yourself somewhere between that neutral and that over full, we're talking about maybe a 7, which I find to be like the happy place of fullness. It's like, wow, my body is content. I don't need any more. I'm nourished. I'm good. Let's move on. I also like to refer to the 8, because I think the 8 is like restaurant full. Like when you go out to a really good restaurant and you do get a dessert, even though maybe you didn't need a dessert. I call that restaurant full. It's just like a little extra full, but it's not like way beyond. So
I love restaurant full.
You start to learn those numbers and get familiarized so that you can tune in and say,
that's so good.
Where am I at? And then of course on the lower end of the spectrum, we have like a 3, which is what I would say is like comfortably hungry. At a 4, you might be busy at your work computer and you start thinking like, potatoes sound good. You know, you're not like starving and you're not hungry enough to get up yet and go get the potatoes. But you start thinking, oh, potatoes sound good for dinner tonight. That's like a 4. Your body is starting to like think about food. A 3, you're probably ready to get up, but oftentimes we'll push to a 2. And here's the kicker, is when you start pushing into extreme hunger, that's when you start pushing into extreme fullness. So if you always wait to eat until you're at a 1 or a 2, you're probably someone who often eats to a 9. Because you're so hungry, you check out from listening to the body's cues to say I'm full, and you eat beyond. You're in kind of like a survival mode, right? Because you go, I don't know when I'm going to get food again, so I better store up.
Yeah.
So we have to talk about intervals of eating and the regularity in which you're feeding yourself, in which you're checking in. So there's a lot there, but that's a little brief on like hunger fullness.
That's so good. And I can speak to the entrepreneurs, maybe the, dare I say, borderline workaholics that allow themselves to get to that, you know, like ravenous zone, where I know that that's been something I've had to work on in the past and you've helped me with, is I'm just like so in the zone in my deep work and, you know, look up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot to eat. And then by that time, the only things that my body is craving are the greasy, you know, oily, unhealthy, fast food type of really quick, you know, caloric explosions essentially, because now my hunger level is so much that I'm like, I have to combat it with a huge meal that's going to make me feel full for hours and hours later. And so it's just a vicious cycle of waiting to that point, binging at that point, and then, you know, you get the same result, because oftentimes when you have those massive sort of like fast food caloric intakes, you really aren't hungry for a very long time. And so you end up skipping your natural hunger cues. You skip your, you know, just even the meal times that we've made so standard, you know, here in the world. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I skipped breakfast and lunch again because I was so full from last night's restaurant full type of, you know, meal that, you know, I'm back here where I don't want to be.
Yeah. And you're hitting on like, again, that innate wisdom that your body holds of like, this body knows it's only getting one meal. So it says like, let's crave something really high caloric, like high density, so that we are held over for a lengthier period of time. And so you crave the burger and the French fries, right? I always think about when I was in public health and I was busy, and I would eat the smallest, quickest lunch, just squeezing it in between clients. And I'd be on my way home from work and I'd be sitting at the stoplight just before where we lived. There was our apartment, or you could turn left and go to the grocery store. And I would sit there every day and I would think, I just want to go to the grocery store and pick up cake. I just want cake, because I was so hungry. And I didn't realize it till I was chatting with another dietitian friend and I was telling her, I'm like, I crave cake every day after work. She asked me, she's like, what does your lunch look like? And I told her, I'm like, it's very quick, it's very rushed, and it's pretty small, it's light, you know. And she was just like, your blood sugar's low. Like, you need to pack a snack for that ride home from work. Pack something nourishing, like a little singular serving of almonds or something, and it will tide you over. You can get home and get something nourishing in your body. But that craving, so strong, so mental, so specific, because the hunger was so real.
So if we're trying to get away from this diet talk and the culture of dieting, and even something that we didn't mention but that comes with that culture is getting away from the scale and the numbers and the rigidity of that whole system, what's a better angle to take? What's another kind of approach that can sort of, you know, keep us on the straight and narrow as it comes to our relationship with our bodies and our relationship with food?
That's good. I mean, I would say number one, habit tracking. When we think about the scale, we're thinking about that being our measure of success often in the diet world. But when we're talking about relationship with food and body, we're talking about habits, and we're tracking, am I doing something differently? I oftentimes will tell clients, like, you can't do the scale. So tell me something else that is what you are using as a measure of success. So what are you actually changing in your life? And so that could be, I am moving my body for X amount of minutes every day. I am incorporating a balanced breakfast that's going to keep my blood sugar steady through the morning. You know, I am checking in with my hunger cues every day at 2 p.m. and assessing if I need to take a break from the workflow. It's those types of things that we can actually measure and see change over time. So yeah, definitely habits, because they're measurable and ultimately they're what changes your life.
That's good. So speaking of habits, you know, we're talking about health, we've been talking about the nutrition side of things. What about movement? Like you mentioned, you know, exercising, working out, even for the men listening, you know, who may have a hard time, as I did, you know, hearing some of this more philosophical approach of understanding a relationship to your body and to food, where maybe we're just like so used to being the brutes in the gym of like, lift heavy weights, eat chicken and rice, you know, and just kind of focusing very much on a diet type of regimen to, see results.
Yeah.
But what kind of movements, talk about what type of approach we should take toward exercise and working out, whether it's in the gym or at home or out in nature, with, whether it's functional or, calisthenics or whatever the case is. What's your advice there?
Yeah. I think whether it's exercise or it is the food piece, just to speak to like what you were saying with men and how they might relate to this, because I know some of intuitive eating can appeal to women because it is tying in the emotional piece more, and that might just be more attractive. But if you're a very black and white person, I would say don't throw out this concept because it isn't just like a list for you, but understand that it's really about getting down to the motives behind what you're doing and why you're doing it, because that's going to bring a more sustained outcome.
That's so good.
And so it's really working on the why and clearing that up and making that a why that is based in self-care.
Yeah.
So to speak to movement, I would say from a self-care approach, it's saying, what do I actually enjoy doing? So if you're someone who hits the gym really hard for like a few months, January and February and March, and then you trickle away.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Then I would say, are you moving your body in a way that you really enjoy? Because if you enjoy it, you're taking care of it in a way that feels good and it lights you up. Not only your body feels good, but your brain feels good doing it. Then this is something you're going to crave and you're going to want to do more of. So I would even say for you, like, I think we're both thinking the same thing right now. 1, 2, 3,
pickleball.
Pickleball is something that you found about a year ago that it lit you up. You couldn't wait to go do it. You wanted to do it multiple times a day. I mean, and it's so good for your body. You're running around, cardiovascular. You're working on all your little pivots and your joints and all these things. Wonderful. But it was also to you, it didn't seem like work. It seemed like fun. So I would say number one, figure out what you enjoy. And that might take time, because if you've been steeped in diet culture, then you've probably only ever just like thought about working out as going to the gym.
Sure.
And going to the gym's great. I enjoy going to the gym. But there are so many other ways creatively that we can move our bodies and we can get out in the earth and enjoy it and have fun. So I would say figure out what you enjoy. And then I would also say think about 2 elements, cardiovascular, because the greatest risk for everyone basically is heart disease. So let's think about, are you getting that heart pumping and muscle mass?
That's
so good. As we're getting into our 30s, we're reaching peak bone density, especially as women. And so from here out, we have got to work to keep our bodies strong. So decade to decade, you are losing muscle mass, and that metabolism is slowing down because of that lean muscle mass. And so you have got to work against that in order to keep your body really optimally functioning. So weight bearing exercise, that could mean lifting weights, but that could also mean, pounding the pavement in some way. So that could be walking, running, jumping. Those types of things are going to load your muscles, and we need that. I can't emphasize that enough.
Nice. Okay. That's good advice, because, I think, like you said, the older we get, it's just easier to not do those things because of busy schedules and or just like you said, an aversion to the hard work of working out, you know. And absolutely, I mean, when I've worked out on and off my whole teenage to adult life, and so it just gets mundane where like another day in the gym doing the same thing over and over and over again. And so for me, when I've incorporated sports, and especially with others, like that's when I'm like a little kid again. I'm like, I can't wait to go play. Mom, can I go outside? So that's a great piece of wisdom. And it really does go back to the habit tracking of like, if I can look at my health and my wellness as, fun habits that make life better, that's a different approach than just the sort of duty of like, I got to go to the gym because I've got, a little bit more to love here around my waist or whatever, and it's like coming from a place of condemnation as opposed to a place of like excitement and recognition that this is like, I got one body. I got to, steward it really well.
And you know what, too, for those who are weary around like the workouts and all of that, just consider for a moment how life was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, beyond that, there weren't people didn't have gym memberships,
Yeah.
but they were active in other ways.
Yeah.
We have increasingly become more sedentary because we've made life easier,
Yeah.
which is wonderful, but there's a downfall to that.
Yeah.
So we drive everywhere, we hire people to mow our lawns,
Sure.
all the things that require physical effort, we're seeming to hire out in this day and
Yeah.
age. And so I would even say just consider your life and the amount of activity you get. That's called non-exercise activity thermogenesis. It's like the calories you're burning just doing things that outside of the gym.
Yeah.
And think, are there ways I can become more active? And
Yeah.
that is a great place to start, is
Yeah.
just evaluate your life in that way from a non-exercise standpoint.
So how do we make this more of a family value, like whether
I
you're
love
a
that.
family or whether, you're a single person, but generally speaking, we talked a couple of episodes ago about building a unbreakable family culture in your home,
Yeah.
having a rule of life that you do things at home. And I really do think that applies to the single person, the married person, any age, any stage. So for us, even moving forward, we have a little guy who, is getting old enough to notice some of the routines. Like
Yeah.
his new thing that he cracks up at is we have this big playpen in the living room, and you tend to do like workouts and stuff in there with him.
Yeah.
And you joke that he's your coach, which is so
Yeah.
cute. He's always like on your body, like adding more weight resistance.
Exactly. Like
So-
knocking me off my feet.
Yeah. So I was inspired by that. I thought it was cute. So I was doing push-ups in there as well to see how he reacted. And he kind of crawled under my chest. And then I would just do a rep, and I would kind of like, fake crush him basically. I would come and like kind of press him on the ground.
dads do.
As dads do. And he's a little too young to get on my back and do it. So I would come down and sort of smother him, and he was like, like just
Yeah, he
loving
loved it.
that. So anyways, he's obviously watching us, seeing that. And who knows, maybe some neurons are firing and he's like, oh, my parents like to be active,
Sure.
So how do we model that? And what advice would you have in terms of this whole bucket of health? I think what you've touched on throughout our conversation is, there's some very tactical, specific things that, deal with nutrition and movement, but health in general, capital H health, means a lot of different things that aren't just what we put in our body and how we move.
Yes.
There's the mental aspect of that. It ties to what we spoke about in episode 12 about even rest and adventure that comes with trips and vacations. And even if it's not, something where you go away, it's just like taking a moment even in your day to get away and, sort of feed the body, get outside, get in the sunlight, get that vitamin D.
Yeah.
So what are some practical things that we can do to make health like a core value, I guess, in life?
Definitely. Well, you hit it on the head. I think number one is model that. So set an example for valuing that. So that might look like having your own routine for making sure you have movement in your day. A child is going to see that and get to know that that's just a part of life as we take care of our bodies. I think along with modeling in our behavior is modeling in the way we speak about movement, nutrition, our bodies. Children are like sponges.
Yeah.
They will pick up whatever you're putting down.
Yeah.
And so if you're speaking really negatively about your body, this is going to be definitely going to be internalized by the child and is going to therein invoke their own self-esteem issues and also just the way that they view themselves.
Yeah.
And so just staying away from harsh body talk, body commentary.
It's good.
But also positive body commentary can be a negative thing too. So just not
Interesting.
making bodies and the way that they look or the way that they're shaped the main
that's a
point
great
of
point.
conversation.
Yeah.
I like to switch the focus into ability. And so it's kind of like form or function. And so talking more about function than form.
Yeah, that's good.
Because you said it earlier in the episode, bodies are diverse. And just because a body isn't shaped like a stick doesn't mean it's not healthy.
Yeah.
And so we could unpack a whole thing about that, but rather I'd like to say put the emphasis on function. So I'm fueling my body with this type of food because it helps me to run faster. It helps me to be stronger. It helps me to have soft skin, understanding what the different vitamins and minerals do or the macronutrients and how they serve you. Educating your child a bit, educate yourself and educate your child a bit so that they understand that food serves a purpose beyond just pleasure.
Yeah.
It really is helping their bodies to thrive. And then I would say, leave out the fear. There's a lot of fear tactics on social media right now, in kind of like teaching kids that certain foods are toxic and things like that. And that is just, it's just really not the approach to go. I've worked with children throughout my years as a dietitian as well. And let me just tell you, fear is not the way to address food. It's more in teaching them to have an understanding for how it serves their body well and teaching them to value their body. So I would say instead of restriction, focus on addition. So instead of, hey, we don't eat any of these foods because these foods are bad, we talk about, let's try to get more of these foods in because these foods serve our bodies really well. So how can we find ways to add that in, add a little more color here, or add something with protein here, and help them understand what it means to build a balanced plate. Those types of things you can do with kids really young. Not make it more than it needs to be, but make it something of education and practice that you can do together as a family.
Man. Seems like you're a professional at this. So, wow. Thank you for schooling us.
Ideas.
Yeah, so good. This topic is obviously pivotal to many of the areas in our life that we're trying to grow in and learn in. And so thank you, Doctor, for your...
Definitely not a doctor. Let's just make that clear.
Yeah.
No, it's been fun to chat through this. And it's fun as a married couple, I think, to work on our relationship with food together. I always say your relationship with food is changing throughout your life. And a big change is when you get married. Another big change is when you have a child. It's ever changing. And so it's always a good time to check back in as life is changing and say, okay, what do I need to do here to optimize my relationship to food and body and keep health a priority?
Love it. This has been so good. If you are watching on YouTube, why don't you just drop a comment and let us know how you're treating your body,
Yeah, are you treating it right?
Maybe on a scale of 1 to Thanksgiving full, how you feeling right now?
Exactly. Let's practice that hunger scale together.
That's right. We hope this episode encourages you in your health journey and inspires you to ask yourself some of these questions around how I'm treating my body, how I'm relating to food, what my habits are in the area of health, and also maybe challenging yourself to think about health in a bigger capacity than just, calories and reps, So this has been another episode of Quality Time with Gabe
and Grace, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Time for love again. My time for love is here.